What's up guys, welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host Caleb. If you want to support me, you can always use the TCGPlayer link in the description down below, or as always, liking, commenting, subscribing, boosting that algorithm will always do the trick. Now, let's get into today's Deck Tech with OB Nixilis, Captive Kingpin. This guy's stacked, guys. He's gonna buff himself up, he gives us card advantage, and honestly, the hoops we have to jump through dealing 1 damage to one of our opponents is not that hard to meet, especially with how I built the deck. One, we're gonna go ahead and storm off with a bunch of instant and sorceries cards that go ahead and draw us cards while creating those treasure tokens. Then whenever those treasure tokens enter the battlefield, we're gonna deal 1 damage to our opponents. Additionally, there's a ton of cards that just give us mana whenever we cast instant or sorcery spells, or deal 1 damage to our opponents whenever we cast instant or sorcery spells. So the goal is simple. We storm off, we draw into our combo if we don't kill them first with how massive this guy gets. And guys, this guy can get pretty massive. So if that sounds like a deck tech you want to get into, let's get into it. Let's kick it off with the storm aspect of the deck. We have Urbrask. This guy's perfect because 1, we're going to deal the 1 damage, and 2, he ramps us. Additionally, if we flip him to the back, not only is he a soft board wipe for one of our opponents, he gives us some treasure tokens, and additionally, he's just going to give us access to everybody's graveyard to keep storming off. Bergie, God of Storytelling. The backside is honestly just unimportant, but the front side, again, whenever we cast one of those instant or sorcery spells, we're going to add some mana. Stormkiln Artist, same thing. This guy's going to add some mana, and he fits into the treasure token theme of the deck. Prosper Tomebound. The themes all coming together. We're casting spells from exile, we're creating treasure tokens, and we're getting more card advantage. Jeska's Will, another card that can really help us on storming off. It's going to add a lot of mana to our mana pool while exiling cards from our library. Sword of Feast and Famine and Sword of Forge and Frontier are also going to be amazing tools in the deck. One will untap our lands, letting us storm off more. Remember, OB Nixilis is going to be big. He will be a combat threat, so throwing swords in the deck is going to be pretty solid. Sword of Forge and Frontier is going to be amazing for getting us 2 more cards to cast from exile, while also letting us cast additional lands, which we can draw into a lot of lands in this deck. Now, that's one half of the storm. The other part of the storm is drawing cards, right? Deadly Dispute. We're going to use cards like this to 1, draw cards and create treasure tokens at the same time. That way we're netting mana and cards, exiling cards from the top of our library. This is where the theme really comes together. Seize the Spoils, Big Score, and Unexpected Windfall are all cards that are going to draw us cards, discard us some cards, and create treasure tokens. Inspired Tinkering. This is another one. Again, we're just drawing cards, discarding cards, and creating those treasure tokens. Keep in mind, cards like this are especially useful because whenever those treasure tokens enter the battlefield, we're going to get 1 damage to throw at our opponents, and then we're going to exile even more cards. And this is where the engine really takes off and why this guy is honestly going to be a menace. Brass's Bounty, super solid. We cast a spell, we create a lot of treasure tokens, we deal a lot of damage, and we exile a lot of cards. The Reaver Cleaver. Remember guys, our commander is going to be massive, so we might as well smash some face and get a lot of treasure tokens out of it. Pain Distributor. This one's going to be perfect because it's going to deal damage a lot while also tying into the treasure token theme. So we're going to be exiling cards, and remember, if we exile or deal 1 damage to our opponents on their turn, that card will still exile and we will have it ready to cast on our turn. So it really doesn't matter when we deal the 1 damage as long as they're taking 1 damage. Revel in Riches seems like a pretty cool card here. 1, it's going to completely stop those aristocrat strategies, or you're just going to win. Additionally, hey, if a creature dies here or there, it's going to give you extra mana on your turn, and remember, we're dealing that 1 damage. So it can basically read in this deck, whenever a creature dies, you deal 1 damage to your opponent, and that can be extremely powerful. Black Market Connections, it draws us cards, and we're going to be generating those treasure tokens, which is exactly what we need to do. Path of the Pyromancer. I'm giving this card a shot. This card's going to be really useful if we end up with one of those hands that just has, 7 lands in it. Now we can go ahead and discard those 7 lands, add 7 mana to our mana pool, get some gas to cast, and start dealing 1 damage to our opponents again. Mana Geyser. This one's amazing. I don't see it played enough for how much mana it adds to your mana pool. Neheb the Eternal. We have potential to deal a lot of damage to our opponents. So why not add a lot of mana to our mana pool using that damage we deal to our opponents? Remember, OB Nixilis is going to be massive. We're dealing damage right and left with our treasures entering the battlefield, and honestly, this guy has the potential to storm us out and win us the game. Taking a break from the storm aspect of the deck, we need to be dealing 1 damage to our opponents on a consistent basis. So here's how we do that. Grape Shot. This is going to be amazing when we cast a ton of cards because it has storm, right? And each instance of Grape Shot is going to exile a different card. So this has potential to just exile, I don't know, 10 cards off the top of our library and dig us really, really deep. Kessing Flame Breather and Firebrand Archer are super solid. Whenever we cast a non-creature spell, we get to deal 1 damage. Electrostatic Field and Thermal Alchemist will trigger on our instant and sorceries. Reckless Fireweaver is going to deal 1 damage whenever one of those treasure tokens enters the battlefield or, artifact. Then we have Hedron Detonator. This one also will trigger on those treasure tokens, while also giving us an option to sacrifice those treasure tokens for some card advantage. Mayhem Devil and Discipline of the Vault are also going to be cards where we sacrifice those treasure tokens and deal 1 damage to our opponents, giving us more cards to cast. Lastly, we have Cataract Parasite. This card's going to be absolutely insane. Remember when I said this can trigger on our opponent's turn? Now our opponents are going to spend all their turns drawing cards, because remember, this is Commander. And then when it gets back to us, we're going to have a ton of cards in exile ready to storm off. This guy's honestly an all-star in the deck and super cheap. Not to mention how massive our Commander is going to get when this guy enters the battlefield and starts putting in work. Moving on to the core of the deck, we have my man Alf over here. This guy's going to double up on all of those spells we cast from exile. That's going to be broken. Passionate Archaeologist. This is going to start dealing a lot of damage to our opponents whenever we cast those spells from exile. Underworld Breach. Super solid. Enters the battlefield. We can cast cards from our graveyard until end of turn. This is going to be amazing for storming off. That's exactly what this deck wants to do. Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots. Our commander is probably going to be a target. I don't know why. So these cards are going to be amazing in the deck at protecting him. Now let's talk about the combos we're running. We have Bolas's Citadel, Aetherflux Reservoir, and Sensei's Divining Top. Now it's not a surprise that these are in here. If you have a storm deck and you're running black, this is one of the best combos you can shove in there, because every single card in this combo is amazing in the deck by itself. Aetherflux Reservoir can start taking opponents out without the Bolas's Citadel. Bolas's Citadel can let us cast those cheap instant and sorcery spells from the top of our library. And then Sensei's Divining Top can dig us deep, make sure we're getting solid draws, and in this deck it can even set off some of our damage dealing triggers. So it's going to be amazing in the deck. Another combo you're probably not going to be surprised to see in the deck is All Will Be One. Now, whenever we deal 1 damage to our opponent, that's going to go ahead and put a counter on OB Nixilis, and then we're going to be able to, deal 1 damage because of All Will Be One. This will go ahead and create an infinite loop, and we can damage everybody out. Now, notably, you're like, hey, you don't have enough cards in your library to exile to deal 120 damage. Well, as long as you don't draw a card, you don't die. So you can just keep dealing the damage to your opponents, and you're good to go. Everybody's dead. Lastly, for this section, we have that Rakdos Signet, Arcane Signet, and that Soul Ring. Moving on to card draw. Because it's never enough, we have Florian Valerian Scion. This guy's going to be solid because, again, we're dealing a lot of damage to our opponents, and this is going to let us dig deep and get exactly the card we need. Faithless Looting, a red staple. This is going to dig us 4 cards deep. Rin's Resolve and Reckless Impulse. I love these. They're super solid, super cheap, get us into those land drops early, and honestly, they're pretty flexible in this deck and how much exile synergy we have. Light Up the Stage. It's not going to be hard to deal that damage and cast it for that spectacle cost. Night's Whisper, Thrill of Possibilities, and Costly Plunder are all solid cards that get us closer to our game plan. Read the Bones, super solid. Again, another cards that can dig us up to 4 cards deep. Ignite the Future. This one has a flashback cost that's kind of insane, but hey, late game it can come in handy. And then we have Wheel of Misfortune. Now, there's a lot of text on this, but it's not that hard to understand once it gets laid out in front of you. So here's what we need to do. 1, everybody choose a number. Whoever chooses the least or the lowest number is not going to wheel at all. So we'll say someone chose 1, someone chose 2, someone chose 3, and someone chose 4. All right, so the guy that chose 1 will not wheel, and then everybody else is going to wheel, and then the guy that chose 4, which is the highest number, he will take 4 damage, but he will still wheel. So 3 people wheel, 1 person doesn't. If everybody chooses 0, nobody wheels, nobody takes damage. Actually, technically they do take 0 damage, but I hope that explained the card. Moving on to removal, we have a counterspell package in red. Wow's Reversal, Tybalt's Trickery, the best of the three, and Bolt Bend. This can make sure we're protecting our OB Nixilis, because honestly that's the main goal of this deck. Chaos Warp is going to get rid of any permanent, Feed the Swarm can get rid of those enchantments or creatures, Dismember, super solid because we are trying to storm off still, so this is basically 1 mana, Blasphemous Act, another card that's basically 1 mana. Now, we can get our commander big enough to actually dodge this. I know that sounds insane, but it is possible. Vandal Blast, super solid for those other treasure token strategies or those other artifact strategies, which there has been a lot of recently. Chandra's Ignition, another card that can go ahead and take out every opponent all at once while wiping the board. And then we have Mount Doom. I included this card, one, because it can hit that 1 damage, and it's about to come out in the Lord of the Rings set, so definitely pick it up if you plan on building this guy. And with that, this brings us to the end of the deck tech. I hope you guys enjoyed. As always, I hope this helped you in your deck building endeavors, and I will see you in the next one.